Welcome to It's All Your Fault on True Story FM, the one and only podcast dedicated to helping you with the most challenging human interactions, those involving high conflict situations. I'm Megan Hunter, usually here with my co-host Bill Eddy, as you all know, but he's celebrating his wife's birthday this week and next, so I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Lomax, who you'll hear from shortly. Both Bill and I are the co-founders of the High Conflict Institute and conflictinfluencer.com, where we focus on training, consulting, coaching, and all kinds of educational classes, all to do with high conflict. And we're really happy that Michael has agreed to join us. He's one of our senior trainers at HCI, and he's also the co-author of the book Mediating High Conflict Disputes with our very own Bill Eddy. He's also our lead trainer for the workplace training for leaders and our New Ways for Work training for coaches. So welcome, listeners. Welcome, Michael. And listeners, we thank you for taking us on your bike ride today. Michael, let's talk about you for a minute. Tell us about you. Where do you live? What do you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Megan. It's great to be here with you this afternoon and your listeners. I'm Michael Lomax. I live in Canada on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. I've been a mediator for well over 25 years and working in the area of workplace dispute resolution for that time, working with leaders and organizations across Canada, the US, Australia. I did practice law for over 2 decades, but really focused on conflict resolution, mediation, those types of processes. And I've been, as you said, I've been an associate trainer with the High Conflict Institutes for 15 years now. And amazing. And I really enjoy working with people and organizations to help leaders, folks in union representatives, organizations use structured, trauma-informed tools to really stay calm, reduce escalation, and really shift these very challenging situations into a problem-solving mode and get good results.
Yeah, we like good results, don't we?
Yeah.
So great. All right. Well, we're talking about understanding high conflict behavior at work on our episode today. So I'm really, really excited to see what comes of this. And I think, really, every workplace has potential for conflict. They're going to have conflict where humans are involved. There's conflict. When you have high conflict involved, it's on. It's a new game. So we'll figure that out. So first of all, what does high conflict behavior actually look like in today's workplace? I mean, things are a little bit different these days. How is it different from normal disagreement?
Right. And as you said, Megan, conflict in the workplace is normal and in some ways quite healthy. We always, as adults, we get into disagreements with people, even about new ideas that are happening in the workplace. There may be disagreements about that. And from time, adults get into personal disagreements and there's hurt feelings or emotions involved, right? That's just part of the human condition. But what makes high conflict so different is these patterns of 4 predictable features that when they ride through the workplace, it can really wreak havoc and cause a lot of damage and a really challenging impacts for leaders, union representatives, whoever's trying to help navigate these kinds of issues in the workplace. And we're talking about those four elements: all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, extreme behaviors, and a preoccupation with blame. And what does that look like? All or nothing thinking. We all can do these things. It's the pattern, and almost it starts to become a bit predictable with some individuals, these patterns of behavior. And so all or nothing thinking, black or white, good versus evil, friend or foe, no middle. And what that can look like in a workplace can be like, if I don't get this promotion or I don't get this assignment, my career is over, or management is either with me or they are against me. And it's very easy to end up on the foe side. Sometimes these folks see people in 2 categories: friend or foe, no middle. And sometimes I'm working with managers, other folks in the workplace, and they'll say, well, I don't believe this person's friend. And I suggest, yeah, you do, because when you're in the foe category, they can be pretty darn creative sometimes.
Creative.
But so it isn't about necessarily going for barbecues together or going apartment hunting together, any of that kind of stuff. But it is about how do I engage with this person if they're prone to this in a way that communicates, I'm not a threat to your well being. It is that core. And then I have information to help you make better decisions where I want to work with you on this. The unmanaged emotions. And again, if a person was always, with a big neon flashing sign saying, I'm high conflict, I have unmanaged emotions, angry in meetings, filing complaints over, little bits of feedback and letting go, can't let go of losing a competition. Like we see that all the time. That is high conflict in the workplace. But that might be easier to deal with in some ways. We could clearly identify it. It's clearly a problem. It's when sometimes it can be more masked and the person knows the game. They know to walk up to the line, but not cross it. And actually other people are reacting to them. And you get more passive aggressive emails, withdrawing from communication, even in the meeting with their manager, just really refusing to participate in any way. Or it can be more intense tone and body language that somebody might actually be afraid of this person, but they're not actually doing anything that you could point to say they're crossing a line. And so that can be very challenging. Extreme behaviors, things that 90% of people would never do. But again, at work, that can look like actually sabotaging work, withholding information, and then saying, it wasn't me, I don't know what you're talking about, and yet setting other people up to fail. Filing multiple grievances and complaints over small issues, lying, or even threats and acting on those threats. That's the difference, right? Sometimes we think these things, all of us think these things from time to time, but they act on it. And with impunity, I'll go to the union, I'll go to the media, I'll sue you. And then they do. And a preoccupation with blame, really authority figures. They go after them pretty readily, or close colleagues, even their own union representative. They may turn on them. And they really do believe that everybody is out to undermine them. And the other piece that's so challenging is they will recruit others to go after their target. And not just, I'm upset with this person, they'll try to destroy them or take down the organization. And so these kinds of patterns can be really distressing for anyone else in the workplace trying to deal with it and try to manage it, and quite shocking sometimes.
Yeah, that group that we often refer to internally or in our trainings as negative advocates, those people that we've recruited to support our all or nothing thinking, our unmanaged emotions, or whatever we're accusing the target of blame. I had someone in a class just yesterday say they call that the wolf pack. So
Yeah.
this wolf pack really becomes your, as I like to think of it, as your cheerleading squad. And they believe this victim's story and this narrative, at least for a while.
Yeah, and it can be very charming, and very often it is a desire to help, but they get caught up in it, or they're misinformed, or they themselves have some of their own issues, and those are being brought up by this person with the way they tell their stories, full of emotion, full of blame. I'm a victim, you need to help me. And people get caught up in that sometimes very quickly, and they're shocked sometimes later. They realize how they got, as you say, fooled.
Yeah, drawn in. Yeah. So often there's a lot of reactivity, emotional reactivity, and it seems to be increasing. There's a lot of anxiety globally, and there has been for the past 5 years or so. So are you kind of seeing this in the workplace, an increase in emotional reactivity?
Yeah, I think it doesn't take rocket scientists to see what's going on around the world to say this is definitely seems to be getting worse. And I hear this from people actually all over the world. I talk to people that have been to other conferences, and they'll say to me, people come up to me at those conferences and say, "Are you dealing with this the way we are?" And people ask me about that, like, what is going on? My wife Tammy and I were actually in the Uber going to the airport in New Zealand. And the Uber driver volunteers without me even asking. My number one phrase is, "Thank you, have a good day." And he says, because everyone is so angry. And so that's just him just telling me, this is how I deal with it. In my view, there's a number of causes for why this is happening, but it is complex, multi-layered. You can't point to one thing and say, this is why it's happening. But I remember a conversation I had with a trauma expert not that many years ago, and she was talking about this concept of the issues in our tissues, that we all carry around stuff in our bodies from things that have happened to us, unresolved kind of experiences, losses or fears, hurts we've accumulated over a lifetime And what she's saying to me is most people, the way they manage that is by staying busy. Just routine, work, social life, kind of distract themselves, just keep the lid on it. Well, guess what? The pandemic hits and those distractions disappear, lockdowns, and now got to deal with that stuff, right? It's coming up for people. And the isolation, the stress, constantly being exposed to negative news. And so then what this person's saying to me is now the issues in our tissues are starting to rise. And most people, this stuff is coming up for them. They don't go, oh, this is my old stuff coming up. They externalize it. They look for a cause outside themselves. And again, back to often authority figures or someone even close to them. And they get into it with that person. And it becomes pretty incredible because it's coming, the driver is the emotional stuff inside that person. But then on top, we've got polarization around the world where people are almost primed to see each other as friend or foe. Social media, which rewards outrage and blame. I remember, somebody telling me about this person doesn't want to be on the news. They want to be the news. So you've got that attention-seeking behavior and being rewarded for it. And then we've got role modeling. We've got public figures normalizing aggressive communication, that kind of thing. And so I would say there's definitely lots to say. There are average people that are under extraordinary stress for all kinds of different reasons. They're closer to their reactivity threshold. And then the workplace is where this shows up.
So in what ways is it showing up in the workplace? Like, have you seen a change in the last 5 years? Because I know you're intimately involved in the workplace and working with people who are experiencing all kinds of issues.
We've always had workplace complaints, workplace conflict, like you say, but I remember not that many years ago, it would take a lot for an employee to say, I'm going to file a complaint against my manager, or for a colleague, another manager, to file a complaint against their manager. And now people are much quicker to file complaints, and they're much more complex in their nature. And very often it is the leader who is the target of that complaint. Even I would suggest maybe 80 or 90% of the time, you can see a leader on the receiving end of these kinds of things. And you're getting more of this high conflict behavior, more of these things dragging out, repeated complaints, that kind of thing. And organizations, the number of complaints they're seeing escalating, the complexity, the length of time it takes to investigate these things. Yeah, so it's definitely on the rise. And, with leaders, I would say, and others that want to help, even, mediators within workplaces, union representatives, human resources, getting pulled into these kinds of things, they themselves feel attacked. Their own ethics, their own competence, their own care being called into question by people saying, you don't care about me. It's really, I would say, emotionally unsettling for those professionals. Like, this is not your average everyday kind of stuff they're dealing with, maybe what they're used to. This can get very personal. People getting on social media and trashing individuals publicly. And it consumes a lot of time and energy, but it follows you home. It makes people want to quit their jobs, the people that are trying to help resolve these kinds of things sometimes, or the leaders. And the sad part is they blame themselves. They say, is there, maybe it's me. I can't get through this person, or, what normally works isn't working here, especially this person is blaming you.
I must not be doing a good job. I guess
right? No, and it's those kind of narratives that we tell ourselves, right? We tell ourselves those stories, particularly at 2:00 in the morning. But it isn't that leaders are weak. It's almost high conflict behavior is almost designed to pull people into this kind of emotional stuff. And that's where we really need that structured approach.
Yeah. So speaking of pulling them in, as we refer to it at HCI, we get hooked, emotionally hooked, right? And it's all in the brain. And those hooks can sometimes make us really angry, overreactive. Sometimes we go into our own all or nothing thinking or blame. Sometimes we just shut down. So leaders can get hooked in those moments and get really stuck. So what's happening in the brain for the leader in those moments? Because I think, a lot of times we want to believe that difficult people, so to speak, are the only ones experiencing something. And yeah, it's a drain on those around them. But the biological disturbance that those around at them, including leaders, what they're experiencing is really difficult. So what's going on?
Yeah, and I totally agree, Megan. I've seen it where it transmits not just one level, it goes like a couple of levels. So you'll be talking to people 2 or 3 degrees separated from the actual person or the actual conflict, but they're getting pulled in by the manager. They're trying to help the manager, that leader, or the union person. And so you see a cast of characters that are impacted profoundly by some of these high conflict situations. A lot of it is very natural and almost instinctive human responses. A friend of mine said once, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. What's going on right now for you, right? The visual I give people around the brain is, imagine a human rider sitting on top of an elephant. And I ask the question, which one's in charge? And some people will say, well, the rider's in charge, right? The rider decides where the elephant is going to go. And other people say, no way, that elephant is in charge. If the elephant says we're going this way, the rider's just along for the ride. And that's a pretty popular image in psychology for how our brains work in conflict. The rider, the thinking part of our brain, logical, conscious, the elephant, that emotional part. And usually that rider's in charge, but every once in a while, the elephant takes over and the mouth is still moving. And we can still type emails. And then maybe 20 minutes later, we're like, oh boy, I screwed up. And they're not good or bad. We need them both. The rider, it's conscious, it's logical, it's deciding what to do. The elephant, much more unconscious, makes decisions very quickly. But the elephant can take over in these kind of dangerous situations, but not just physical danger, social danger. We kind of react the same. And ideally, we've all got the skills to calm ourselves down and get back, in that 20 minutes where the rider's back in charge. But there are definitely in these high conflict situations, people we're dealing with where they are stuck. They're stuck where the elephant's running the show, even 80% of the time. And so we've got the same threat sensors. And so we see someone else who's angry or insults our intelligence or even rolls their eyes at us, or uses a tone of voice or their body language, even sometimes more than the words that are being used, that can, as you say, trigger or hook us. Our elephant takes over. And the research says that the problem is we don't realize that it happened. We still think we're logical, making these great points. We don't realize how we sound. We don't realize how our own thinking is distorted. And then we may turn to others because we're feeling attacked and transmit that on to others. Say, I'm a manager and I've got someone from human resources trying to help me. And I'm blaming them. You're supposed to be helping me with this person. Why aren't you helping me? And as you say, then we want to argue or sometimes give in, or we just freeze up. And so really the key is, how do we stay in our own problem-solving brain, keep our rider in charge when that other person isn't in theirs? And that's really, as you say, the foundation for a lot of what we're trying to help people with.
Yeah, and often in high conflict situations, we do overreact. And we, like you said, we don't feel it. We don't know what's happening. We're just going about our day, but we might be emotionally hooked and we kind of overreact. And then it really escalates. So, what can we do to regulate ourselves before responding? So let's say you're a manager and you have that person that's coming in your office yet once again, and you know there's going to be a problem because there's always a problem. If I'm conflict avoidant, I might do what? I might be passive. I might just let the person, spill out their complaint again about their coworker or whatever is going on, and take on the responsibility on my shoulders to be the problem solver because that's what I've been hired to do. But with high conflict, we really have to do something else. But before we even get to that something else, we have to regulate. So what's the best way to regulate? Like if you're conflict avoider or conflict comfortable?
I think in a lot of ways, we are trying to bring ourselves into the middle, right? If I'm avoiding, that's my kind of default, is to sort of hope this will go away or maybe give in to the person, or kind of softly kind of try to talk to them about this indirectly, hint around it. How do I bring myself into the middle where I'm more comfortable being assertive and putting these things more matter of factly on the table? Or if I'm someone who's very comfortable, even with getting into conflict and arguing and trying to win, again, how do I come back into the middle? Because I know either of those two extremes in high conflict is not going to work well. I want to find a way to be assertive and confident, but connected too. And so I really do, as you say, need to regulate my own self, calm myself in the face of some of this stuff that is very natural to get hooked by. And so a couple of big tips that I try to talk to people about that work for me too. I make mistakes all the time with this stuff. I blow it all the time. Pretty much all my stories whenever I'm doing training is somehow I blew it and then I make it back somehow.
That's how
Right?
we
I
learn.
don't walk on water with this. And in the world of high conflict, that's actually impossible. You could be doing everything right and it's still going to be extremely challenging. So, a couple of big ones are just asking myself, checking out with myself, like, am I in reactive thinking right now? Is my elephant taken over? Because as I've said, we can click over and not realize it. And yet by doing that, just asking ourselves the question, we're getting kind of cognitive on our feelings, checking in with ourselves. That alone sometimes can help you click back because you're thinking about it instead of just reacting. Or you realize I need to go for a walk around the block or something and take a break here. And really, telling ourselves encouraging statements. We're always telling ourselves something, and our brain is always listening. And I remember going for a walk with Tammy once, and I said, "Do you ever rehearse conversations with other people that you hope to never have?" She's like, "Yeah, all the time." Right? We're always rehearsing these kind of worst case scenarios, worst case conversations. We can actually feel our physiology change with that. We almost feel like we're in it. And so we can do the opposite. Like, I'll get through this. Having little phrases like that, affirmations, those work. I'm a good supervisor. Or I have friends that like me. It's okay if this person doesn't like me. That's all right.
Yep. Yep. It's not about me.
And it's not about me. This is about this person. They're having a hard time regulating their emotions. So even if they call me a name or blame me, and maybe I really do want to help, and that is hurtful. It's hurtful to hear that, realize this is not about me. And sometimes it is really when they say, I won't do any of the things you've said. Again, that can be distressing if we're really worried about the outcome. How do I instead tell myself the only thing I can control is how I interact with this person, how I engage. I cannot control what they think, what they feel, what they do. And so if I focus on staying connected and calm and focus on choices and information, they may listen to what I'm saying. They may see me as someone who wants to help solve their problem. And they then themselves may make a better decision if I am staying connected with them, bringing them down to the middle, and almost kind of, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. I can't control that part. All I can control is what I'm doing. So those are things I always try to tell myself in these stressful situations. What can I control? Checking in with myself, and yeah, those can be hugely helpful strategies.
Yeah. So now let's say you've managed to keep your emotions in check. And even if you got a little bit, spicy within yourself, give yourself that moment to calm down and maybe give yourself that encouraging statement or remind yourself that I get along with most people. So I just have to try to, use skills here. So now we've moved on to how am I going to shift someone as a manager or a leader who's really upset? We got that same person coming in the office again, right? Complaining again. Now the problem is on my shoulders because, again, it's my job. And I'm a little spiced up because they've said something and I have a million things to do. And now I have to listen to this again, right? So how do we then shift that person from being upset? Like, can we de-escalate them or connect with their, those upset feelings and shift them into problem solving?
Yeah. And again, these are sometimes where we may, in our experience, think, well, I have to spend, a couple hours with this person to kind of hear them out, hear them vent, complain about everything, complain about me, the organization, everyone else. And then, but my experience might be at the end of those 2 hours, we're actually no further ahead than we were at the beginning. We might even be worse off. And I feel like I'm drowning with them. And so and as I said, as I talked about the brain, unless we actually do something to shift it, it's just going to stay stuck there, and it's going to cost more of ourselves than we're able to give. And we might be just outside our skill set. I can't resolve this person's emotions for them very often, right? So it really is, how do I calm this person and then intentionally shift to problem solving and then move away from the emotions? And, the term we use is calm before think. And I think that's a really memorable kind of strategy tactic, and it does work really, really well. We can't just skip to problem solving and over the emotions. This person is upset, they're hooked, they themselves are hooked in blame and all or nothing thinking. And so, the calming is using those ear statements to really communicate to the person, I'm not a threat.
I like that. I'm not a threat.
By communicating I'm not a threat, we're reducing the other person's anxiety level
and reactivity.
And then we're trying to also help them shift, calm that reactive brain and shift back over to problem solving. And so we're not trying to resolve the person's feelings, make them feel better in the sense of that we're, resolve that for them. That may not be possible. We're acknowledging, connecting, and then very intentionally moving to things like, let's look at your choices. I have some information for you, or invite them to make a proposal. Those are all cognitive problem-solving activities. And now we're in the space we need to be in. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy to resolve it. An example of this I can think of, I've been struck by this a number of times where I've worked with managers, and it could be around, say, a routine performance conversation about some mistakes the employee is making, problems. And right away, the employee becomes very upset, like over the top, unmanaged emotions, and starts blaming, saying, you're actually taking me back into a traumatic experience right now. That's what you're doing to me. Or you don't care about me at all. You hate me. And the manager gets hooked because they care. They care about this employee. They want to be seen as a caring manager. And they shift into kind of defending themselves. I do care. And suddenly the conversation becomes about the manager's character. And they're arguing about whether or not the manager cares about the employee instead of staying on, what is it I was here to talk to you about? And that never gets dealt with. And both walk away from the meeting feeling way worse than they were at the beginning. Whereas I've seen and worked with managers who start practicing this calm before thinking a strategy. And sometimes it isn't necessarily going to make the other person easier to deal with. It is also about, how do I calm myself and I feel confident engaging with this very challenging person. And so we go out of our way when this person's reacting this way. Oh, you're putting me back in my trauma again. You don't care about me. You hate me. Is connect. I respect how difficult this is hearing this information, or I care and I want to help, or I want to work with you on this, but then very intentionally redirecting back to the task in a matter-of-fact way. Now let's get back to what we're talking about. And that can become the new pattern. And in lots of cases, I've had managers say to me, actually, that did improve things. And even in some cases with the employees moving on saying, thank you for your support in the relationship. So we can shift things.
It really can. And sometimes just using the calm part, using ear statements, seems to make the problem go away, because now it's less important. It's not important enough to even bring up. So you might not even have to shift into the thinking parts and focusing on choices and things. It's kind of interesting. Different leaders I've talked to who've thought they would have to use both parts of the strategy, calming with an ear statement before getting them thinking with choices, options, or proposals. And they're done at after the ear statement. It's like, oh, okay, I feel better.
Because if you are successful in helping to calm this person and they do kind of return to a problem-solving frame of mind and exhale a bit, well, now we can problem solve together. We're in the space we need to be in, right?
Yep.
So a genuine attempt to connect like that can be amazing in kind of de-escalating. And this person's in distress very often. You just can lean in the face of that attack. Lean in.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. All right. So, Michael, let's talk about the email that lit the fuse. We're going to talk about how a leader should respond in a situation like this. So I think you have an email.
So the example we were talking about was, let's say you're the boss of everybody involved here. That's your kind of character. And there's a senior director who reports to you, sends out a late night email criticizing a project delay, CCs everybody on the leadership team. And by morning, team members are forwarding the email defensively to each other. Slack channels are buzzing with blame and sarcasm. A project manager refuses to attend the next meeting, and a high performer threatens to transfer departments. So there's some pretty reactive
Yep.
folks on this team. HR receives complaints about a hostile tone, and now we are the person. How do I restore trust, calm emotions, keep the project on track, and manage their own reaction to being publicly challenged, basically.
Well, I'd yell at him.
There you go. Yeah. All the person in your office, and yeah.
Is it something that you would attack right away? Like, is it something you'd let sit for a while and see if it goes away, or is it something we should address immediately?
Well, there are some dilemmas here. I will say this scenario, as simple as that one is to read out, there's a lot of complexity here, and sort of there's probably more ways to respond ineffectually than there are to respond really well to it. One, I think overall, I would say responding quickly to events like this or where there's misinformation with accurate information in a calm way and trying our best to kind of settle things down, almost try to pour cold water on these flames with whatever I do. That's a good strategy because has the potential to really explode, right? So I would say one needs to think about responding pretty quickly to this. And then now there are dilemmas about what do I do? Like even the first thing I'd actually ask myself before I launched was like, there was a great thing someone said to me once about being a leader is when things are going well, look out the window. When things aren't going very well, look in the mirror.
Okay.
So have I clearly set expectations for how disagreements are handled on this team? Have I modeled the tone and behavior I expect from senior leaders? Have I set that down real clear for everyone? And then if not, that's some things I need to be thinking about as I go forward, right? How am I going to deal with that? But the dilemma, like how do I stabilize the team, is that I come out with an email right away. A quick email saying, I see what's going on. Maybe I need to correct some misinformation in a calm tone and saying, I will be connecting with everyone and we'll sort this through. Is that the best course of action right away? Or is it to say, I'm going to talk to individuals or a small team as quickly as I can in one-to-ones to settle this down? And I can see both in real life, it would be deciding which one, right? In some cases, that email right away might be the best thing if things are really starting to escalate and get off the rails. But the risk is you look like you took a side, you don't have all the information, and you look like you're reacting, right? You're panicking, right? And then follow with those one-to-ones. But if I wait and I say, I'm just going to meet with people, well, that may take too long. And meanwhile, stuff's happening. People are having these side conversations, and it may look to some like you're doing nothing. So somehow it's a combination of those things. And the question is, what is the right order? But it definitely having one-to-ones with people to hear them out and then doing that calm before think, like empathizing, respect, and then shifting to helping them remind themselves of their own values. How do they want to show up? What are their choices? How do we move forward? With the senior leader, again, complex here. Is this high conflict behavior? I honestly don't know. It's one email. I don't know if this is high conflict behavior, which is a pattern, right? There's a problem, but is it a one-off where maybe the leader was in some distress or they just had a moment? Doesn't mean it's okay, but it's not a pattern. This is out of character for them. I might handle that differently in that conversation with them than if this is a pattern. And if it's a pattern, the challenge is with senior leaders, is this what they've learned? This is how I motivate people. This is how we deal with mistakes and failures, is by blaming and chastising people. And that can happen where some senior leaders are very good at getting results, but they leave behind damage. And in some organizations, they actually plan for it, and they know who they're going to send in up afterwards to clean up after that person's moved on. So in that case, I would say, calm before think. That kind of strategy with a senior leader is helpful. Like, hey, I respect what you're trying to do, and yet here's, some consequences I see or impacts I see, and we need to look at how to address this. And even, in your role, here's where you're not meeting the expectations, information. But it may take something more sophisticated than that in terms of, if this person is, the term an abrasive leader, it may take some real structured coaching with that person to help them, because very often these senior leaders, they think this is how you do it.
Absolutely. You're in charge. It's what you were hired to do.
They may have seen others do it. That's how they were mentored, and they've been rewarded for it. And so it isn't one conversation that's going to fix any of that. And they may go, I can outlast you. You'll be moving on, and then I will carry on. Or even I'll get you back. So I would just say about that, it's going to take some highly structured, if it's coaching, it's got to be highly structured to focus on those issues and really help that leader shift patterns. And that's going to take a concerted effort on your part and their part to do that.
So it's a little bit different depending on the situation and who's involved and whether this is a repeated pattern or not. So kind of the best way to address something when you know there's conflict, you're not sure exactly what to do, sit down and write a list of your options of how to handle this. Then go through the list and check your own reactivity. Am I being all or nothing with this option? Is this coming from a strong emotion? How will this land on the other person or the team if I do it this way? And you just take out any of those that have a yes answer, and you're left with probably the best response in a high conflict situation, because it extracts any bit of your own high conflict thinking, which we can get into, right? And then we can figure out what to do from there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that urge to act, do something now, instead of stop, think, check in with myself, and then look at a couple of options and start to weigh the pros and cons. Like I've gotten emails from Australia that I thought, oh my goodness, I got to write back right away. And I'm like, wait a second, it's 2:00 in the morning there. I probably have a good 20 minutes to just sit and think about this before I immediately launch, right? But it's almost my own distress. I want to do something. So I've acted now. I feel better. So as you say, absolutely, just take a minute, think about it, look at the different options, weigh the pros and cons, say, right, this is what I'm going to do.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, thank you, Michael, for being with us today. We are keeping you around for a second episode, and we're going to talk even more in depth about the tools for leaders to deal with high conflict situations. So to our listeners, thank you for listening today. You'll find links for the training that I mentioned earlier that Michael teaches called New Ways for Work for Coaches. That's coming up March 3rd and 5th, which is really soon. And he's teaching managing high conflict behavior in the workplace for leaders on April 23rd. So we'll put those links in the show notes, and we'd love to have you sign up. He'd love to see you there. It's as a virtual training. We'll also put links to our books, It's All Your Fault at Work and Biff at Work. We're going to be talking about Biff in the next episode. So if you're looking for training or consultation about a high conflict situation or for your organization, visit us at highconflictinstitute.com. Or if you have a high conflict situation in your personal life, visit conflictinfluencer.com. Keep learning and practicing the skills. Be kind to yourself and others while we all try to keep the conflict small and find the missing piece. It's All Your Fault is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. Music by Wolf Samuels, John Coggins, and Ziv Moran. Find the show notes, and transcripts at truestory.fm or highconflictinstitute.com/podcast. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.